She walked away, broken, until the millionaire stopped her at the airport and said, "Marry me." Hey there. Welcome back to the channel. Are you ready for a story that's going to pull at your heartstrings? Imagine this: a woman, broken and alone, walking away from it all, only to be stopped by a millionaire at the airport. And what does he say? Marry me. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh, not another love story, trust me, this one is different. You won't believe what happens next. But first, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Stories TH for more captivating stories like this. Oh, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Let's get to know each other better. Grab a seat, take a deep breath, and get ready for a wild ride. Let's dive in. Emily Lane's worst morning. Emily Lane had no idea that the day she started her new job would be one of the worst mornings of her life. As she rushed through the sleek, polished hallways of Smith Enterprises, her heart raced. She glanced at her watch, 5 minutes until the meeting started, and she had no idea where the conference room was. Her first day on the job as a translator, and she was already late. This could not be happening. Great, Emily. You're going to get fired before you even sign the contract. Congratulations on breaking records, she muttered to herself under her breath, clutching her bag and tablet. Her stomach churned as she hurried down the hall, trying not to look too panicked. But that wasn't even the worst part of the day yet. Just as she rounded a corner, a sudden chill ran down her spine. Her stomach twisted painfully. She paused for a second, clutching her stomach as panic set in. It was a feeling she knew all too well, the feeling that she needed to go to the bathroom. Right now. Frantic, she scanned her surroundings. There was a restroom ahead, and she rushed toward it, hoping she wouldn't be late to the meeting. She pushed open the door and entered, desperate for some relief. The sound of running water filled the air as she rushed to the sink, washed her hands quickly, and let out a sigh of relief. But that's when things started to go wrong. Something felt off. Emily looked around. There were no makeup mirrors, no feminine hygiene bins, and as she turned, she heard voices, male voices. Man, that financial report was a mess. Did you see it? Yeah, the boss is going to be mad. And have you seen his temper? One voice chuckled. Emily froze. Her stomach dropped, and her heart skipped a beat. No way. She blinked, trying to shake off the horrible realization. She glanced around. This couldn't be happening. She quickly scanned the room. There were no signs indicating it was the women's restroom. She had walked into the men's bathroom by mistake. Her pulse spiked, and panic hit her like a wave. She spun around, doing the only sensible thing she could think of in that moment. She bolted into the nearest stall, shutting the door behind her. Okay. Stay calm, Emily, she told herself. They'll leave soon, and you can sneak out unnoticed. Perfect plan, right? Except for one tiny detail. She forgot to lock the door. The handle rattled. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Oh no. This was it. The door swung open. Standing there in nothing but a towel was a tall, muscular man. Emily's eyes went wide in disbelief. She froze. Adam Smith! She practically screamed. Her voice cracked, and she stumbled backward. Adam blinked in surprise, his gaze scanning her like she had just appeared out of thin air. His confusion mirrored hers. What the hell is this? He asked, his tone sharp, but filled with the same surprise. Before she could respond, Emily's brain scrambled for an explanation. Her eyes darted to the nearest thing she could grab, a roll of toilet paper. It was all she had. She raised it like an impromptu weapon, trying to look as if she had some control over the situation. Why are you here? She demanded. Adam shot her a confused look, obviously trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank, or if she was just out of her mind. Emily could feel her face burning, and her mind screamed in panic. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to forget this ever happened. Emily stammered, trying to think of something, anything, that could explain why she was in the wrong bathroom. I'm doing an audit, she said quickly, looking for an excuse. Sanitary safety audit. Checking if the restrooms meet company standards. Yeah, that's it. That's why I'm here. I'm sorry. I need to leave now. Adam crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow, clearly not believing her. A sanitary safety audit in the men's bathroom. During work hours? Emily's brain raced. Why did she think this was a good cover story? She'd clearly lost her mind. Yes, it's a new program, the first company to test it out. I'll leave right now, no harm done, she said quickly, trying to slip past him, but Adam, now annoyed, blocked her way. This is some kind of joke, right? Are there cameras around here? He asked, looking suspiciously at the ceiling. No, there aren't any cameras, Emily replied, her voice cracking with desperation. She tried to step around him, but in her panic, she tripped over the janitor's cart just outside the stall. The bucket tipped over, spilling water across the floor. Emily's eyes went wide. The last thing she needed was to cause an even bigger mess. Adam leaped back to avoid being splashed, and Emily felt her world crumble beneath her. This is it, she muttered to herself, mortified. She had not only walked into the wrong bathroom, but now was about to be fired on her first day. Emily scrambled out of the bathroom as quickly as she could, her face burning with embarrassment. Adam stood there, his towel barely hanging on, staring after her with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. The worst was yet to come. When Emily finally mustered up enough courage to enter the meeting room, she looked up and saw Adam standing at the head of the table. Her heart skipped a beat, and she tried to act normal, but the color drained from her face. Adam turned to look at her with narrowed eyes. "Miss Lane," he said, his voice cold. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, trying to smile through her anxiety. "I'm your new interpreter," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Adam blinked, and for a second it felt like the room held its breath. The silence was suffocating. "Seriously?" Adam said, looking like he had just walked into an absurd dream. "You're the new interpreter?" Emily wanted to vanish into thin air, but somehow she managed to keep her composure. The challenge. The room was dead silent. Emily could feel every set of eyes in the room burning into her as she nervously shuffled her papers. She was now fully aware of the ridiculousness of the situation. Adam Smith, the CEO she had already embarrassed herself in front of, was glaring at her with a look that said everything. He was not impressed. Not even a little bit. "Miss Lane," Adam said, his voice cool and professional. "You're my new interpreter?" Emily nodded, trying her best to maintain a calm demeanor. "Technically, yes, Mr. Smith," she said, clearing her throat to steady her nerves. "I've been hired to assist with international meetings and ensure smooth communication between the company and foreign investors." Adam's eyes narrowed as he processed her explanation. "And your first day involved you barging into the men's restroom?" Emily's face went even redder. She wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. "It was a minor mistake," she said quickly, her voice shaky. "I got lost and went through the wrong door by accident. It won't happen again." One of the executives at the table cleared his throat, attempting to break the tension. "Well, at least we know Miss Lane has a adventurous spirit," he said with a nervous chuckle. Emily could barely manage a tight-lipped smile. She was about to lose her job, and she could feel the pressure building up in her chest. Adam, however, was not amused. He didn't even crack a smile. Instead, he rubbed his temple as if trying to understand the cosmic joke the universe was playing on him. "Do I really deserve this?" Adam muttered under his breath. "I must have been punished for something I did in a past life." Emily could only nod sympathetically, her hands gripping the papers in front of her. She knew she wasn't going to get fired on her first day, but at this rate, the embarrassment she'd already caused was enough to haunt her for a while. The meeting finally started, and Adam seemed to make a concerted effort to ignore her. But Emily didn't mind that. She was focused on her work, on making sure everything went smoothly. She had trained for this. She had spent years preparing for this kind of job, and she wasn't going to let her first disastrous moment derail her. As the meeting went on, Emily translated every word with precision, never once missing a beat. She knew how to keep her professional mask in place, and that's what she did. Adam threw multiple tests her way, speaking faster, throwing more complex terms at her, trying to trip her up. But each time Emily responded effortlessly, her confidence building with each successful translation. After a while, Adam stopped his onslaught of tests. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, and watched her with an intensity that made Emily feel like he was reading her soul. His face betrayed nothing, but Emily could feel the weight of his gaze. It was like he was trying to figure her out, to uncover something hidden beneath the surface. By the end of the meeting, the executives were impressed. Emily had passed Adam's tests with flying colors, and even though she was still terrified of him, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride. She had survived. She had made it through her first day. Adam, however, did not seem impressed. He stood up, adjusting his jacket, and turned to face her. 1 week, he said, his voice flat. You have 1 week to prove you deserve this job. If you make even one mistake, you're out. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. 1 week? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Exactly, Adam said. His gaze was cold, unyielding. Survive for 1 week, and maybe I'll think about keeping you around. But don't get too comfortable. This is a challenge, Miss Lane. Emily was stunned. She had expected him to be tough, but this was more than she had anticipated. She opened her mouth to protest, but Adam was already walking away, his back turned to her. Good luck, he called over his shoulder as he left the room. As the door closed behind him, Emily collapsed into her chair, letting out a long sigh. A challenge. She had 1 week to prove herself, and if she messed up even once, she was done. Are you okay? One of the executives asked, his voice laced with concern. Emily nodded, though she didn't feel okay. Not at all. Yeah, I'm fine, she said, forcing a smile. Just a little overwhelmed. She gathered her things and headed out of the meeting room, her mind racing. 1 week. 1 week to prove herself to the most demanding boss she had ever met. Emily knew that the real battle was just beginning. Over the next few days, Adam threw every challenge he could think of her way. He assigned her increasingly complex translations, gave her impossible deadlines, and made her handle tasks with no notice at all. Emily didn't flinch. She took every test with determination, refusing to let him see any cracks in her confidence. But despite her hard work, Adam kept pushing. He wasn't making things easy for her, and the more he tested her, the more she began to wonder. What was it about him that made her heart race every time he walked into the room? Why was he so determined to see her fail? She couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something about Adam Smith that she couldn't get out of her head, something deeper than just his cold demeanor and the tough exterior he put up. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. Pushing boundaries. The days dragged on. Emily had learned to push through the challenges Adam kept throwing at her. Every morning, she would arrive early, prepared for the worst. It was as if Adam had decided she needed to prove herself worthy of even being in the same room with him. Each test felt like an obstacle course, but Emily refused to back down. She knew how much this job meant to her, and she was determined to survive this week. Despite the overwhelming pressure, Emily had a strange sense of accomplishment. She could feel herself growing stronger with each task. Adam's relentless challenges forced her to be more efficient, more precise. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, even if she didn't want to admit it to herself. However, the tension between them was undeniable. Every time they crossed paths, Emily could feel the electricity in the air, and Adam didn't make it any easier. He continued to test her knowledge, pushing her past her limits, sometimes even just to watch her struggle. It was exhausting, but Emily refused to let him see how close she was to the edge. One morning, as Emily sat at her desk reviewing a long report, Adam walked into her office. She barely looked up at him, already anticipating what was coming next. "Emily," he said, his tone abrupt, "I need this translated by noon. It's complicated, but I know you can handle it." She glanced up, barely suppressing a sigh. "Of course, Mr. Smith. I'll get it done." She looked back at the report, feeling the weight of another impossible deadline pressing on her chest. Adam didn't leave immediately. He stood there watching her, his presence like a heavy fog that filled the room. Emily glanced at him, catching the faintest hint of frustration in his eyes. What was it about her that seemed to drive him crazy? "You think I'm making this easy for you, don't you?" he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Emily's head snapped up, surprised by the question. "No, of course not," she replied quickly. "But it's my job, Mr. Smith. I'll handle it." Adam frowned. "I didn't ask you to just handle it," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I'm testing you. I need to see if you can handle pressure, if you can keep up with the pace of this company." Emily didn't respond immediately. She felt like she was walking on a tightrope. Part of her wanted to push back, to say something, but the other part, the part that had worked so hard to get here, knew that she needed to prove herself. "I understand," she said finally, forcing a smile. Adam nodded once and left her office without another word, but Emily could feel his eyes on her as he walked out. His presence lingered, leaving her both unsettled and oddly motivated. As the days passed, the challenges didn't stop. Adam kept finding new ways to make her work harder, faster, better. At times it felt like she was running a marathon with no finish line in sight. She had moments where she wanted to break down, to throw in the towel. But then she would remember her dream this job, the opportunity to prove herself, to make something of her life. She couldn't give up now, not when she was so close. But as much as Emily tried to focus on the work, there was something that kept creeping into her thoughts, Adam. His sharp words, his cold demeanor, and yet the fleeting moments when his gaze softened, when he seemed to let his guard down. It confused her. She couldn't understand why he was so hard on her, and yet there were these little hints that he was impressed by her resilience. One evening, as Emily sat hunched over her desk, furiously translating a new report Adam had dumped on her, she felt a wave of exhaustion hit her. She rubbed her eyes trying to push through, but her body screamed for rest. She glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A text from Adam flashed on the screen. "Meet me in the conference room in 10 minutes. I need you to review something." Emily frowned at the message. She hadn't even realized Adam was still in the office, but she quickly grabbed her things and made her way to the conference room, knowing that refusing him wasn't an option. When she arrived, Adam was standing by the large window, looking out over the city's skyline. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You've been working non-stop," he said, his tone softer than usual. "I'm pushing you too hard." Emily hesitated. "I'm fine, Mr. Smith. I can handle it." She wasn't about to admit she was exhausted. That would only show weakness. Adam studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You shouldn't have to work this hard just to prove yourself. You're good at what you do, Emily. You don't need to keep proving it to me." Emily blinked, thrown off guard by his words. "I'm just doing my job." Adam shook his head. "No, you're doing more than that. You're trying to prove something to yourself. I can see it in the way you work. But you don't have to prove anything. Not to me. Not to anyone." For a brief moment, Emily could have sworn she saw a glimpse of something human in his eyes. Vulnerability. Regret. But before she could react, Adam cleared his throat and turned back toward the window. "I just need to know I can count on you," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I need someone who won't back down, no matter what." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to ask him why he was pushing her so hard, but the other part knew that now wasn't the time. "You can count on me," she said simply, her voice steady. Adam didn't reply right away. He just stood there, silent. Emily didn't know what he was thinking, but the tension in the room was palpable. For the first time, she realized something. She wasn't just working for her future anymore. She was working for something else, something bigger. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand Adam Smith a little more than she had before. The test of trust. The next morning, Emily felt the weight of Adam's words still pressing down on her. "You don't have to prove anything to me." The phrase kept echoing in her mind as she walked into the office. She wasn't sure what to make of it. Was Adam softening up? Or was this just another one of his mind games to test her? As she entered her office, Emily noticed her phone buzzing with a text. She quickly grabbed it, half expecting it to be another impossible task from Adam. But it wasn't. The message was short and to the point. "Conference room in 10 minutes. We need to go over the presentation for the investors tomorrow. Bring your notes. It was from Adam, and this time, there was no demand for extra work or cryptic message, just a simple instruction. Emily grabbed her notebook, took a deep breath, and made her way to the conference room. Her heart was still pounding from last night's conversation, and now she had to face him again, this time with no work distractions. When she arrived, Adam was already there, standing by the projector, setting up a presentation. His posture was rigid as always, but this time, there was something different in the way he was working. He wasn't rushing, pushing, or throwing orders. He was simply preparing, like anyone else getting ready for a meeting. "Morning," Emily said as she walked in, trying to keep her voice steady. Adam glanced up, his eyes locking onto hers for a split second. "Morning," he replied curtly, but this time there was no edge in his voice. He motioned for her to sit at the table. "We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started." Emily sat down and opened her notebook, ready to dive into the task. As they went over the presentation, she noticed Adam wasn't just throwing information at her or expecting her to act as a translator. He was actually engaging with her, asking for her input and opinions on what would be most effective for the investors. "This section on market expansion," Adam said, pointing to the slide on the screen. "What do you think we should highlight? Should we focus more on the international growth or the tech side of things?" Emily paused, thinking carefully. International growth would be key, but if we highlight the tech advancements, it could make investors feel like they're getting in on something groundbreaking. Adam looked at her, nodding thoughtfully. "Good point. Let's adjust that." For the first time since they had started working together, Emily felt like she wasn't just being tested. She was part of the process. Adam was listening to her, respecting her insights, and she wasn't sure why, but that made the situation feel strangely comfortable. As the meeting dragged on, Adam began to ease up. Instead of demanding quick answers or pressing her for perfection, he asked more open-ended questions. Emily found herself responding with ideas she had only just begun to form in her mind, and he didn't interrupt. The back and forth between them was fluid, almost like a partnership, and for a brief moment, Emily allowed herself to think that maybe things could work out between them. But then the door to the conference room opened, and the rest of the team filed in, snapping Emily out of her thoughts. The professional masks returned as they transitioned into full meeting mode. As the investors filtered in, Emily's nerves kicked back in. She quickly pulled herself together, focusing on the presentation and the upcoming translations. Adam, as usual, stood at the front of the room, exuding the confidence of someone who was used to being in control. The investors listened to him intently, but Emily couldn't help but notice the tension in his jaw, the subtle lines of stress that hadn't been there earlier. Despite his composed exterior, something was clearly weighing on him. As she translated, Emily found herself constantly glancing over at Adam, noticing the way he seemed more distant than usual. It was almost like the shield he had let down earlier was back up again. She caught his gaze a few times, but he quickly turned away, burying himself in the meeting. It was almost like he had let her in, only to pull away again. When the meeting wrapped up, Adam dismissed the team. Emily stood up to gather her things, but as she turned to leave, Adam stopped her. "Can you stay for a moment?" he asked quietly. The room was nearly empty now, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was he about to throw another challenge her way? She nodded, sitting back down as Adam closed the door behind him. "You did well today," he said, his voice low. "Your suggestions were helpful. I didn't expect that." Emily felt a blush creep up her neck. She wasn't used to compliments from him, especially not ones that felt so personal. "Thanks," she said, feeling slightly awkward. "I'm just doing my job." Adam didn't seem to hear her response. He walked over to the window and stared out at the city, his back to her. "I don't know why I keep pushing you so hard, Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're capable. I know you're better than most people I've worked with." Emily's stomach tightened. "Then why?" she asked, unable to stop herself. "Why do you keep testing me like this?" Adam turned to face her, and for a moment his eyes softened. "Because I need to know you can handle it. I need to know I can trust you when it counts." trust me?" Emily echoed, confusion written all over her face. "Yeah," Adam said, looking down at the floor. "This company, my career, it's all on the line. I've got too many things at stake. If you're going to work with me, I need to be sure that you can handle the pressure. I don't trust easily." Emily nodded slowly, trying to process what he was saying. "I get it," she said softly. "But trust goes both ways, Adam. You can't just keep pushing me to see if I'll break. You've got to trust me to do my job." Adam stared at her for a long time, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Then, with a sigh, he walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I've been hard on you, but I won't do that anymore, I promise." For the first time, Emily saw a real shift in Adam's demeanor. He wasn't just the cold, distant CEO anymore. In that moment, he was just a man trying to navigate a difficult situation. And maybe, just maybe, they could figure it out together. Cracking the walls. The days following their conversation in the conference room were different. Emily could feel it in the air, in the way Adam interacted with her. It was subtle, but noticeable. He didn't throw impossible tasks at her anymore. He didn't push her just to see if she would break. Instead, he trusted her to do her job, and that was something Emily hadn't expected. For the first time, she felt like she was working with him, not just for him. They would brainstorm together, bouncing ideas back and forth, and Adam actually listened to her opinions. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments where he would retreat into his professional armor. But Emily could see that something was changing. Slowly but surely, the walls Adam had built around himself were starting to crack. But as much as the work environment was improving, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something still holding Adam back. He had opened up to her in the conference room that day, but since then he had kept his distance. The small gestures of kindness had disappeared. He was still the same man who never shared much about his personal life, the same man who kept his emotions locked away. She couldn't deny it anymore. She was starting to care about him. The more time they spent together, the more she found herself drawn to him, not just for his ambition or the power he held, but for the person underneath it all. She was beginning to understand the complexities of Adam Smith. He was driven, focused, and ruthless when it came to business. But there was a quiet vulnerability to him, one he didn't allow anyone to see. One late evening, as Emily was preparing for another meeting with international investors, she caught a glimpse of Adam standing by the window of his office. His posture was tense, his shoulders tight. She had learned to read him well by now. He was in one of those moods something was weighing on his mind. Emily hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should leave him alone or try to break through the barrier he had put up again. She decided to approach him. "Mr. Smith?" she called softly, her voice breaking the silence in the hallway. Adam turned toward her, his face giving away nothing, but his eyes were hard. "Emily," he said, his tone colder than she expected. "What's going on?" Emily took a deep breath, her hands slightly trembling. "I was wondering if we could talk. You've been distant lately, and I don't know why." Adam's expression hardened, his eyes briefly flicking to the floor. For a split second, Emily saw something almost human behind the mask he wore. But it was gone before she could analyze it further. "I don't have time for personal conversations, Emily," he said sharply, the coldness in his voice cutting through the air. "We have work to do." Emily's heart sank, but she stood her ground. "Adam, this isn't just about work. You can't keep pushing people away like this. You can't keep pretending like everything is fine." His eyes flashed with frustration. "You don't understand, Emily. I have too much riding on this. If I start letting my guard down, if I start caring about someone, I won't be able to handle it. I can't afford to get distracted." Emily's stomach twisted as she processed his words. "You're afraid," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Afraid that letting people in will make you weaker." Adam didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. The way he clenched his jaw said it all. He was terrified of being vulnerable, of allowing anyone to see that he, too, had fears and weaknesses. "I'm not asking you to let me in," Emily continued, her voice steady. But you can't keep shutting everyone out. It's not healthy. It's not sustainable. Adam finally met her gaze, his expression unreadable. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of his inner conflict hanging between them. Emily could feel the tension in the room like a physical presence, and she wanted nothing more than to ease it. But she couldn't do it for him. He had to want it himself. "Why are you here, Emily?" Adam asked, his voice softening just slightly. "What is it you want from me?" Emily wasn't sure how to answer. What did she want from him? She wanted him to trust her, to open up, to let go of the walls he had built around himself. But most of all, she wanted him to stop running from his own feelings. "I want you to trust me," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to do everything alone, Adam. You have people who care about you, and you don't have to push them away." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I can't afford to need anyone," he muttered, almost to himself. "I can't afford to be weak." Emily took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "But you're not weak, Adam. You're human. You can't keep pretending that you're invincible. No one is." Adam's eyes softened for a brief moment, and Emily could see the conflict in his gaze. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind his CEO persona. He was just a man vulnerable, conflicted, and struggling. "I've spent so long building this empire," Adam said, his voice almost a whisper, "and I've sacrificed so much to get here. I can't afford to lose everything because of someone else." Emily took another step closer, her heart racing. "You don't have to lose everything. You don't have to sacrifice yourself for your work. There's a balance. You can have both. You can have success and love, but you have to let people in. You have to trust them." Adam's gaze met hers again, this time with something softer in his eyes. He didn't speak for a long moment, and Emily wondered if she had said too much. But then finally he spoke, his voice low and full of hesitation. "I don't know how to trust anymore, Emily," he said quietly. "But maybe I could try." In that moment, Emily knew that things were changing between them. Slowly but surely, the walls Adam had spent so long building were starting to crumble. And maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something stronger together. The unraveling. The days after that conversation between Emily and Adam were different, in ways both subtle and profound. Emily could sense a shift in Adam, a small but significant change in the way he carried himself around her. It wasn't as dramatic as she might have expected, but it was enough to give her hope. He was trying to trust, trying to let go, and maybe, just maybe, trying to let her in. But old habits die hard. Adam still had his moments of coldness, his lapses into the aloof CEO who expected perfection, but Emily had learned to read him by now. She could tell when his walls were up, and she knew when to back off. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience. She was willing to give him time to figure himself out, time to open up at his own pace. However, as they spent more time together in the office, Emily couldn't ignore the feeling that Adam was still holding something back. Every now and then she would catch a glimpse of the man who had shown vulnerability in the conference room, but just as quickly, he would retreat into his professional shell. It was like there was a battle inside of him, one he wasn't ready to lose. One afternoon, Emily was sitting at her desk, working through some paperwork, when her phone buzzed. She picked it up, expecting it to be another urgent task from Adam. But when she opened the message, her stomach lurched. "Meet me at the conference room. We need to discuss the next phase of the project. Urgent." There was no pleasantry, no small talk, just the demand, as usual. But this time, something felt different. The urgency in his message made her wonder if something more was at stake. She quickly gathered her things and made her way to the conference room, her mind racing with thoughts of what could be coming. What could Adam need from her that was so important? And why now, after all the progress they had made? When Emily entered the room, Adam was already there, standing at the head of the table, his gaze fixed on a series of documents in front of him. His usual business-like demeanor was back in full force, and for a moment, she felt the distance between them once again. It was like he had retreated behind his shield without even realizing it. "Close the door," Adam said, not looking up. Emily obeyed, her curiosity getting the better of her. She crossed the room and took a seat across from him. She watched as he shuffled through the papers in front of him, his expression hard to read. Finally, he looked up and met her gaze. "We've hit a snag with the project," he said, his voice as cold and detached as ever. "There are complications with the investors. I need you to handle the negotiations. You're the only one who can make this work." Emily blinked, caught off guard by his request. "Me?" she repeated. "Why me?" Adam's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening slightly. "You're the one who understands the international side of things. You've been handling the translations without issue. I trust you more than anyone else here." There it was again, the trust. For a fleeting moment, Emily allowed herself to feel a small sense of pride. Adam was finally acknowledging her skills, her value. But the weight of his words, the urgency in his tone, made her realize that this wasn't just a simple request. "What's going on, Adam?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. "This isn't just about the project, is it?" Adam didn't answer right away. He looked away, as though trying to gather his thoughts. The silence between them grew thick, and Emily could almost feel the tension in the room. She wasn't just his translator anymore. He was asking her to take on something much bigger. "Things are complicated," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "I'm not good at asking for help, Emily. I've always had to do everything myself. But this time, I don't have all the answers. I need you to take the lead on this. I need you to make sure everything goes smoothly." Emily studied him, her mind racing. She could see the cracks in his armor now, the flickers of uncertainty. Adam, the man who had prided himself on control, was admitting that he needed someone else. That, in itself, was a significant moment. But she wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily. "You're not alone in this, Adam," she said gently, her voice firm but understanding. "I'm here to help. But you have to stop running from this. You can't keep pushing people away. I can't do this for you. You have to trust me completely." Adam didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on her. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how," he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice taking her by surprise. "I don't know how to let go, how to trust." Emily felt her heart soften. She understood more than he realized. She knew what it was like to be afraid of trusting, of opening up to someone. But that was the only way forward. "You start by letting someone in," Emily said softly. "You don't have to do everything alone, Adam. Not anymore." For a long moment, Adam didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at her. Emily could see the struggle in his eyes, the battle between wanting to let her in and fearing what might happen if he did. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe I've been wrong about you, Emily," he said, his voice quieter now. Maybe I can trust you." Emily smiled, feeling a small sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't everything, but it was a start, and sometimes that was all they needed. As they sat down to discuss the details of the project, Emily couldn't help but notice a shift in Adam. He was still the same intense, driven CEO, but there was a softness to him now, a willingness to trust, even if it was just a little bit. And for the first time, Emily believed that maybe they could both figure this out together. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Breaking the silence. The following days seemed to bring a new kind of rhythm to Emily and Adam's interactions. There was a quiet shift between them that neither of them spoke of directly, but it was palpable in every conversation, every meeting. Adam's demands were no less intense, but there was a newfound respect in the way they worked together. It was as if the walls that had once separated them had been chipped away, slowly but surely. Emily could tell that Adam was still struggling with the idea of truly letting go, but his moments of hesitation were becoming fewer and fewer. He no longer demanded perfection from her in the same way. Instead, he asked for her thoughts, her ideas, her feedback. And for the first time since starting this job, Emily didn't feel like she was constantly walking on eggshells around him. Still, despite the progress, there were moments of tension. Adam's carefully constructed world had not fallen apart just because he was learning to trust. There were lingering doubts, moments of doubt, especially when they were in the company of others. Emily saw how Adam quickly reverted to his CEO persona in front of the board members or other executives. It was like slipping into an old, familiar coat that protected him from anything too personal. But it was a start. At least he was starting to trust her behind closed doors. One afternoon, as Emily was leaving the office after another late meeting, she received a text from Adam. It was brief, but it sent a jolt through her chest. "Can you meet me at the bar downstairs?" She stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of what to make of it. They had never met outside of work like this before, not for any reason that wasn't related to a business function or an after-work debriefing. It felt different, more personal. She felt a mix of excitement and trepidation, but decided she would go. There was something about this moment that felt significant, even if she couldn't pinpoint why. When she walked into the dimly lit bar, she immediately spotted Adam sitting at a table near the corner. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp suit and tie. Instead, he wore a dark shirt and jeans, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. But even in his casual attire, there was still an air of command about him. He looked up when she walked in and gave her a small, almost hesitant smile. "Emily," he said, his voice soft. "You came." She nodded, walking over to the table. "You texted. I'm here." Adam gestured for her to sit, and she took the seat across from him. The tension between them wasn't as thick as it used to be, but it was still there. He wasn't his usual guarded self, but there was something almost vulnerable about him in this setting out of his element, in a place where he didn't hold the same power as he did in the office. The waitress came over and took their drink orders. Adam didn't immediately dive into conversation. Instead, he sat back, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass as he looked at her. Emily could feel his eyes on her, but she didn't look away. She wasn't sure where this was going, but for once, she wasn't trying to figure it out. She just wanted to be in the moment. After a long pause, Adam spoke. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing this all wrong?" His question was vague, and Emily wasn't sure what he meant. "Doing what all wrong?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Life," he said, his voice low. "Work, relationships, everything." Emily's heart tightened in her chest. She had always known there was more to Adam than the stoic CEO persona he projected. But hearing him admit to something so raw, so human, was a different side of him. She took a deep breath, thinking carefully about how to respond. "I think we all get caught up in doing things the way we think we're supposed to. We chase success, approval, stability," she said, her voice gentle. "But sometimes we forget that it's okay to step off the path and just breathe, just live." Adam's eyes softened at her words, and for the first time, he looked vulnerable, like he was wrestling with something deep inside. "That's easy to say, Emily," he said, a hint of frustration in his tone. "But how do you live when you've spent your entire life building something? How do you let go of control when you're afraid everything will fall apart?" Emily reached across the table, her hand resting just inches from his. "You trust," she said, her voice steady and calm. "You trust that even if things do fall apart, you can rebuild. You don't have to do it all alone. You don't have to control everything." Adam looked down at her hand for a moment, then back into her eyes. His face was unreadable, but Emily could see the way his brow furrowed, as if he was trying to process everything she had just said. "I've been pushing people away my whole life," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to stop." Emily's heart ached at his words. She knew he had been through more than most people could imagine. She could see it in the lines of his face, the guarded way he carried himself. But here, sitting across from her in a quiet bar, he was letting his guard down, even if just a little. "You don't have to stop all at once," Emily said, squeezing his hand gently. "You just have to start with one person. Start with someone you trust." Adam didn't say anything for a long while. He just stared at their hands, both resting on the table. The silence between them felt comfortable, not awkward. In that moment, Emily realized that this was more than just a work relationship. This was about something real, something that wasn't built on perfection or business deals, but on trust and understanding. Finally, Adam lifted his head and met her eyes. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, something softer than she had ever seen. "I'm not perfect, Emily," he said quietly. "And I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm trying." And that was enough. For the first time, Adam wasn't asking for perfection. He was just asking for a chance. And Emily realized, as she looked into his eyes, that she was more than willing to give it to him. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft hum of the bar and the low clink of glasses, Emily knew that this was the beginning of something new, something that neither of them had expected, but both desperately needed: the moment of change. The following days passed with a quiet intensity that neither Emily nor Adam had expected. The air between them had shifted yet again. There was an unspoken understanding now, a bridge built not just of words, but of the moments they had shared, the vulnerabilities they had opened up to each other. Adam still held on to his CEO persona, but there was a softness to him now, and Emily had begun to see a side of him that no one else seemed to. The project they were working on together was progressing smoothly, with Emily taking the lead on many of the negotiations Adam had once carried alone. She had proven herself in the field, and Adam had trusted her decisions more than he cared to admit. But there was a lingering question in the back of Emily's mind. Could they continue to balance this delicate dance between personal and professional? One evening, as she worked late in her office, Emily was interrupted by a knock on her door. She looked up to see Adam standing there, looking as composed as ever, but there was something different in his eyes. His expression was serious, but his body language was open, as if he was no longer afraid to let her see what was on his mind. "You've been here for hours," he said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "You need a break." Emily gave him a small smile, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her. It had been weeks since their conversation in the bar, and she had sensed a change in their dynamic. He was no longer the intimidating figure he once was. There was something more human about him now. And that wasn't just about the work they had begun to talk outside the office, about personal matters, small moments of vulnerability that had opened up new dimensions of their relationship. "I'm fine," she said, pushing her chair back and standing up. "I'm just finishing up some things for the investors tomorrow." Adam walked over to her desk and leaned against it. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," he said, his voice low. "You don't have to do everything on your own." Emily paused, meeting his gaze. For a moment, she could see the man she had come to know in those quieter moments, the one who wasn't afraid to let her see his doubts and fears. "I don't mind," she said softly. "I like what I do." Adam raised an eyebrow. "You like overworking yourself?" She laughed lightly. "I like being challenged. You've certainly given me plenty of that." A slight smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Fair enough," he said. "But you can't keep pushing yourself like this. It's not healthy." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for the way he had started to take care of her, in his own way. He wasn't perfect, no one was, but he was trying. And for the first time, she realized that maybe she wasn't just working with Adam anymore. Maybe they were starting to build something outside of work too, something more personal. "You're right," she said, her tone lighter now. "I've been running on fumes, but I can't help it. There's so much at stake." Adam pushed off from the desk, standing up straight. "I know, but you don't have to carry it all alone. We're in this together." The sincerity in his voice took Emily by surprise. There was a calm assurance behind his words, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. She had always seen him as a man in control, but now he was speaking to her like an equal, like someone who wanted to share the burden, not just delegate it. She smiled softly, feeling a rush of warmth. "I appreciate that, Adam. I really do." For a moment, they just stood there in silence, the tension from the office melting away. Emily couldn't remember the last time she had felt this comfortable around him. Maybe it was because she had seen the cracks in his armor, or maybe it was because he was finally letting her see the man behind the mask. Either way, it felt like they were on the same page for the first time. Adam broke the silence, his voice softening. "There's something else I wanted to say." Emily looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" He hesitated for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts, then spoke. "I'm not good at this," he began, looking down at his hands, clearly unsure. "At relationships. I've never been the type to open up, to let anyone get close." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had known that Adam was guarded, but hearing him admit it made something inside her stir. "But I'm trying," he continued, meeting her gaze again. "I'm trying to trust you. I'm trying to let you in." The honesty in his words hit Emily hard. She had known that Adam had his walls, but hearing him speak so openly about them made her realize just how much he was allowing himself to change. For her. For them. "You don't have to try so hard," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere, Adam. I want to be here, and I want to help you." Adam's eyes softened, and for a moment there was no mask, no CEO, just a man who had been through more than anyone should have to, and was finally letting someone else see the real him. "I've never had someone like you around," he admitted, his voice low. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Emily took a deep breath, her emotions running wild. She had been waiting for him to say something like this, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. Adam, the man who had always kept people at arm's length, was finally letting her in, and in that moment she realized how much that meant. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore," she said, her voice steady but full of feeling. "We're in this together, remember?" Adam nodded slowly, his expression softening. And for the first time, Emily felt like they were truly on the same team. Not just professionally, but personally too. As the conversation drew to a close, Emily and Adam exchanged a look, one that spoke volumes. There were still challenges ahead, of course. They both knew that. But for the first time, Emily felt like they could face them together. And that was a promise she was willing to keep. New beginnings. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for both Emily and Adam. The project they had been working on for months was finally nearing its completion, and the pressure to deliver was higher than ever. But despite the long hours and intense deadlines, something had shifted in their dynamic. They were no longer just co-workers. They were becoming something more, partners, not just in the office, but in everything they did. Emily found herself thinking about Adam more than she had ever expected. She knew it wasn't just the late nights they had spent working side by side. It was something deeper, something unspoken, that had started to grow between them. He had opened up to her, let his guard down in ways he hadn't with anyone else. And even though there were still moments when he retreated into his shell, Emily could tell that he was trying. She had never been more sure of anything. One evening, as the sun began to set and the office started to empty, Emily sat at her desk, reviewing the final details of the project's presentation. The tension in the air was thick, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Adam had trusted her to handle this, and she had risen to the challenge. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from Adam. "Conference room in 10 minutes. We need to go over everything before the investors arrive." Emily smiled to herself. It was his usual way of pushing her to be prepared, but this time it felt different. It felt like they were in sync, like they were a team. She stood up, grabbed her notes, and walked down the hallway toward the conference room. She didn't feel the usual nerves she had in the past. Instead, she felt ready. Ready to present, ready to lead, and ready for whatever came next. When she entered the conference room, Adam was already there, standing in front of the large table, looking over the final presentation slides. He looked up when she entered, his expression a mixture of concentration and something else, something that made Emily's heart skip a beat. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steady, but with an edge of anticipation. "I think so," Emily replied, taking her seat across from him. "Everything's in order, but I wanted to double-check a few things before we meet with the investors." Adam nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Good. We can't afford any mistakes." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another meeting. It was the culmination of everything they had worked for, the trust they had built, the long hours, the sleepless nights. And despite all the pressure, despite the fear of failure, she felt a quiet sense of pride. They had come so far together. As the meeting went on, Emily and Adam worked seamlessly, adjusting the presentation, refining the details, and anticipating the investors' questions. It felt natural. It felt right. And when the investors finally arrived, Emily could sense the difference. Adam was more relaxed than usual, more open to collaboration. He trusted her to take the lead, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just working for him. She was working with him on equal footing. The meeting itself went smoothly, as expected. The investors were impressed with their presentation, and by the end of it, the deal was practically sealed. But what struck Emily the most wasn't the success of the project. It was the way Adam looked at her when it was over. As the investors filed out of the room, Adam turned to Emily, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "You did great," he said, his voice warm with genuine appreciation. "I knew I could count on you." Emily smiled, a wave of relief washing over her. "Thanks. It was a team effort." Adam stepped closer to her, his expression softening. "No, Emily. It was you. You made this happen." Her heart raced as she looked up at him. There was no mistaking the sincerity in his voice. This wasn't just about work anymore. There was something deeper between them, something that went beyond the office, beyond the project. It was trust. It was respect. And maybe, just maybe, it was something more. Before she could respond, Adam reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent a jolt through her, making her breath catch in her throat. It was a moment of vulnerability, a rare instance where Adam wasn't hiding behind his usual professional demeanor. "Emily," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to do this, whatever it is between us. But I want to try. I want to see where it goes." Her heart fluttered as she took in his words. The man who had always kept everything under control, the man who had pushed her away for so long, was finally letting go. And he was asking her to take a chance on him, to take a chance on them. Without thinking, she stepped closer to him, her pulse quickening. "I'm willing to try too, Adam. Before she could finish, Adam took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Without a word, he cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle yet firm. And then, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss full of urgency or desperation. It was soft, tender, a promise. A promise that they were no longer just two people working together. They were two people willing to take the next step, to see where this new chapter would lead. When they pulled away, Adam rested his forehead against hers, his breath shallow. "I've been scared for so long," he said quietly. "But I think it's time I stopped running." Emily smiled, her heart full. "It's not about running, Adam. It's about moving forward." Adam nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Then let's move forward." And just like that, everything changed. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Emily knew she wasn't facing it alone. They were in this together, ready to take on whatever came next. Facing the future. Together. The days following their kiss in the conference room felt surreal. Emily couldn't help but replay the moment over and over in her mind. There was no rush, no pressure, just a simple, quiet promise shared between them. A promise of trust, vulnerability, and a new beginning. It wasn't an easy path, and neither of them expected things to magically fall into place. But for the first time, Emily felt like they were on the same page. They were no longer just colleagues or business partners, they were something more. Work continued, of course. The project they had worked so hard on had successfully closed with the investors, and Adam's leadership and Emily's contributions had earned them the recognition they deserved. But outside of the office, things had shifted. They had both started to explore this new dynamic between them, learning to balance their professional lives with the personal connection that had started to bloom. Adam, despite his usual guarded nature, began to open up more, even in front of others. Emily noticed it during meetings and casual conversations. He was still the driven, focused CEO she had always known. But there was a certain warmth in the way he interacted with her, something that hadn't been there before. He was less of the distant boss and more of a partner. Emily had never imagined that someone like him could let their guard down so completely. And yet, here they were, building something together. It wasn't just in the office either. They started to spend more time together outside of work. A quiet dinner at a restaurant, walks in the park on weekends, late-night conversations about everything from their childhoods to their goals in life. Emily had never felt so comfortable with someone before. With Adam, she didn't feel like she had to be anything other than herself. One Friday evening, after a long week of meetings, Emily and Adam found themselves sitting on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. They had both come a long way from the awkwardness of their first days working together. Emily had known from the start that Adam was not like anyone else she had ever met. But now, she was beginning to see the complexities of him, the layers of ambition, fear, and tenderness that made up who he was. Adam sat beside her, a glass of wine in his hand, and stared out into the distance. Emily could tell he was deep in thought, his mind constantly on the go. But tonight, for once, he seemed to be at peace. The tension that usually hung around him was gone. "You know, I used to think I had it all figured out," Adam said, breaking the silence. "That if I just worked hard enough, stayed focused enough, I could control everything." Emily turned to look at him, her heart softening at the vulnerability in his voice. "And now?" He took a deep breath, setting his glass down. "Now, I realize that it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to trust someone else. To let go." Emily smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "You've come a long way, Adam. I think you're starting to see that you don't have to do everything alone." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know how to thank you for being here, for helping me see that." "You don't have to thank me," Emily replied. "You did it yourself. You took the first step." Adam turned toward her, his gaze steady and searching. "I'm scared, Emily. Scared that if I let myself care too much, I'll lose everything." Emily's heart ached for him. She could feel the weight of his fears, the hesitation that still lingered deep inside him. But she also saw how far he had come, how much he had changed. "You don't have to lose everything," she said softly. "Not if you don't let fear control you. We can face the future together. Whatever comes, we'll handle it." For a long moment, Adam didn't say anything. He just looked at her, as if trying to process her words. Then, slowly, he leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. "Together," he whispered. Emily closed her eyes, letting the moment wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like everything was falling into place. They were no longer just two people orbiting around their own lives. They were a team, supporting each other, learning to trust, and ready to face whatever came next. Later that night, after the city had quieted down, and they had retreated inside, Adam's phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a message from one of the board members, a reminder about an upcoming meeting the next week. Adam sighed, clearly not looking forward to it. "I thought we were past all this," he said, running a hand through his hair. Emily smiled and reached for his hand. "You are. You're not alone in this anymore. You don't have to carry the weight of it all." Adam looked at her, his expression softening. "I know, but I still struggle with letting go of control." Emily's smile widened. "We all do, but you're learning. And you don't have to do it all at once." Adam nodded, a faint smile pulling at his lips. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," Emily admitted, "but we'll figure it out, one step at a time." As the night drew to a close, Adam and Emily found themselves leaning into each other more than they ever had before. There was still so much to navigate, so much to learn about themselves and each other. But for the first time, Neither of them was afraid of the journey ahead. They were in this together, ready to face the future with open hearts and open minds. And that was all they needed. Embracing the change. As the weeks passed, things between Emily and Adam continued to evolve in ways that neither of them could have predicted. They had grown closer, their bond deepening as they navigated the challenges of work and life together. There were still obstacles to overcome. Of course, Adam's need for control, Emily's hesitations about fully letting go, but with each passing day, they became more in tune with each other, more willing to embrace the unknown. The project they had worked so tirelessly on had reached its final stages, and Emily could feel the excitement and anticipation in the air. This was a milestone, not just for the company, but for them. Their hard work had paid off, and the fruits of their labor were about to be presented to a group of high-profile investors. Emily had always been a part of this journey, but now, more than ever, she felt like an equal, like she had truly earned her place beside Adam. As they walked into the conference room, Adam's usual poise and confidence were on full display. But this time, Emily noticed something different. There was a quiet sense of calm about him. It was as if he had finally let go of some of the weight he had been carrying for so long. And it wasn't just the successful project, it was the way he had started to trust in her, in them. They weren't just co-workers anymore. They were partners, in every sense of the word. Emily took her seat at the table beside him, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. The investors began to trickle in, exchanging pleasantries as they settled into their seats. Emily had always been accustomed to these high-stakes meetings, but today felt different. She wasn't just translating or managing the logistics, she was a part of the decision-making process. She was just as invested in the outcome as Adam was. Adam turned to her as the room quieted, giving her a small but reassuring smile. "We've got this," he said, his voice calm but filled with confidence. Emily nodded, feeling a surge of warmth at his words. "I know we do." The meeting kicked off and they moved through the presentation with ease. The investors seemed impressed, asking the expected questions, and Emily effortlessly translated Adam's responses, adding her insights when needed. But what struck her most was the way Adam spoke. He was no longer the cold, distant CEO who had kept everything close to the vest. He was engaging with the investors, answering questions with confidence, but also with humility. He wasn't afraid to show a little vulnerability, to admit when something was still in progress, or when a decision was still being worked through. It was a side of him Emily had never seen before, and it made her respect him even more. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that the project was a success. The investors had signed off on everything, and the deal was done. But what made the moment even sweeter for Emily was the way Adam looked at her when the meeting wrapped up. There was pride in his eyes, and something more, a recognition of the journey they had been on together. As the room cleared out, Adam turned to her with a look of genuine appreciation. "We did it," he said, his voice soft. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "We did." He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and firm. "Thank you, Emily, for everything." There was so much she wanted to say, but the words didn't come immediately. Instead, she simply squeezed his hand, letting the moment speak for itself. As they left the conference room, Adam's hand still in hers, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. She remembered the days when she had been so uncertain, so nervous about their working relationship. She remembered the walls Adam had put up, the way he had kept her at a distance. And now, here they were partners, not just in business, but in everything. They had built something real, something that wasn't just about work, but about trust, mutual respect, and a shared vision of the future. That evening, after the successful meeting, Adam invited Emily to join him for dinner at a small, quiet restaurant in the city. It wasn't a celebration with a large group of colleagues, it was just the two of them, sharing a moment of calm after the storm of the past few weeks. They sat across from each other, enjoying the food, the conversation, and the simple pleasure of each other's company. As the evening went on, Emily found herself feeling more at ease with Adam than ever before. The barriers between them had dissolved completely, and in their place was something deeper, something more meaningful. They didn't have to talk about what was between them. They both understood it without saying a word. And yet, there was a quiet confidence in the way they looked at each other, in the way their hands occasionally brushed as they reached for their glasses. As they finished their meal, Adam leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I've spent so much of my life trying to control everything," he said, his voice low. "But I think I'm starting to see that I don't have to do it all alone." Emily met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. "You don't, Adam. You never have." He smiled, and for the first time, Emily saw a sense of peace in him, a peace he had never allowed himself to feel before. "Thank you for being here," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Emily's smile was soft, but full of meaning. "You don't have to do anything alone anymore, Adam. Not as long as I'm here." And in that moment, they both knew that this was just the beginning. They had built something strong, something that was more than just a partnership. It was a bond, a future. And together, they were ready to face whatever came next, side by side. The road ahead, the days after their quiet dinner were filled with a sense of ease that Emily hadn't anticipated. Adam had changed, and it was clear to everyone around him. He no longer had to put up the walls he once relied on. Instead, he had started letting the people he trusted in, and that included Emily. Their connection, built on mutual respect and trust, had created something stronger than either of them could have imagined. Work continued to be a whirlwind. The project that had kept them up late for so many nights was now behind them, and the team was moving forward to the next phase. Emily's role had evolved as well. She had become more than just an interpreter. She was now part of the decision-making process. Adam had asked for her input more than once in recent meetings, valuing her perspective not just because of her work, but because of the way she saw the world, the way she thought. She was no longer just the assistant to the CEO. She was his equal, a partner. But as much as things had changed between them professionally, it was the personal side that began to catch Emily off guard. The more time she spent with Adam outside the office, the more she realized that the bond they had built was deeper than she could have anticipated. There was an ease with him now, a feeling of comfort in his presence that she hadn't experienced with anyone else before. Their talks, their quiet moments together, had become some of the most cherished parts of her day. One Sunday afternoon, Emily was at her apartment, curled up on the couch with a book when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Adam. "Come for a walk with me. I need to get out of the office for a bit." A smile tugged at her lips. She had always known that Adam had a tendency to bury himself in work, but lately, it seemed he was learning to take breaks, to find balance. She quickly put her book down, grabbed her jacket, and headed out the door. When she arrived at the park where Adam had suggested they meet, she found him leaning against a tree, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him outside of work. His usual sharp features softened by the late afternoon light. He looked almost like a different person. He wasn't the CEO now. He was just Adam, a man who, for the first time, wasn't consumed by the weight of responsibility. "Hey," she greeted him with a smile. Adam turned, his lips curving into a grin. "Hey you," he said, stepping forward to meet her. "How's your Sunday going?" "Better now that I'm not buried in work," she said playfully, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Adam chuckled, his eyes lighting up with warmth. "I think I needed this more than you. Just getting out of my head for a while." As they began walking side by side, Emily noticed how much more relaxed Adam seemed. His usual tension was gone, and there was something peaceful in the way he moved. For the first time, he seemed truly present. No business meetings, no investor calls, just the two of them, taking a stroll in the park. The conversation flowed easily between them. They talked about everything work, of course, but also about things that mattered more. Their hopes, their fears, the things they had learned along the way. Emily found herself laughing at things she never thought she would find funny, and Adam shared stories of his childhood that she had never heard before. "I always thought that if I just kept my head down and worked hard enough, things would fall into place," Adam said, his voice thoughtful. "But I've realized that life doesn't work that way. It's not all about control. It's about connections, about the people you choose to let in." Emily looked at him, touched by his words. She could see how far he had come since their first days together. "I'm glad you're starting to see that," she said quietly. "It's not about doing it all alone. It's about having people around you who support you, who challenge you." He smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "Yeah, and I think I've found that in you." The moment hung between them, both of them feeling the weight of the words. It was more than just a compliment. It was an acknowledgement of everything they had shared, the trust, the vulnerability, and the unspoken understanding between them. They had come a long way from the business partnership they had started with. Now, they were something more, something real. As they continued their walk, they fell into a comfortable silence, the kind of silence that spoke volumes without needing to be filled with words. Emily didn't need to say anything. She was just content to be with him, to share this moment. Adam, for once, seemed to feel the same. Later, as they reached a small bench near a fountain, Adam sat down first, motioning for Emily to join him. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, his voice serious, "about where we are going." Emily raised an eyebrow, sensing the gravity in his tone. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know we've been taking things one day at a time, but I think I'm ready for more," Adam said, his voice steady. "I'm ready to stop holding back." The vulnerability in his voice made Emily's heart race. She knew exactly what he was saying, but hearing him put it into words made everything feel even more real. "I'm ready too," she replied softly, her hand finding his. "We're ready for this, Adam. Together." He squeezed her hand, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Together." And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt completely at peace. The future was still uncertain. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome, but for now, she knew that as long as they faced it together, they could handle anything. The road ahead was wide open, and they were ready to walk it side by side. New horizons. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change, both for Emily and Adam, and for the company they had worked so tirelessly to build. Their relationship had deepened in ways neither of them had expected, and as they continued to grow closer, they realized that they had become something more than just partners in business. They had become partners in life. Adam, despite his ever-present drive for success, began to open up more, not just to Emily, but to those around him. The man who had once held everything close, afraid to show any vulnerability, was starting to trust. He was starting to let go of the need to control every aspect of his life. Emily had been the catalyst for that change, but Adam's willingness to let go of his fears had been the most important factor. On a personal level, their bond continued to flourish. Emily found herself falling for him in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had always admired his ambition, his strength, and his ability to push through obstacles. But now, she saw something more. He was gentle in ways that only she could see, vulnerable in ways that others never would. And with each passing day, her feelings for him grew stronger, deeper, but she also knew that their journey was only just beginning. There was still much to figure out, and the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. At work, things had settled into a new rhythm. Adam had promoted Emily to a senior role, one that placed her in charge of several key accounts and projects. It was a huge leap for her, and she knew it came with new challenges. But it was also a sign of how far they had come, both as colleagues and as a couple. Adam trusted her, and he wanted her to succeed. And more importantly, Emily knew that she was ready for this next step. One evening, after a long day of meetings and strategy sessions, Emily and Adam found themselves sitting on the balcony of his apartment once again. The city lights sparkled below them, but it was the quiet between them that felt most significant. It was as if they had both come to realize that there was no longer any need for words to fill the space. The silence was comfortable, a reflection of the deep trust and understanding they had built. Adam took a deep breath, his gaze focused on the horizon. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice softer than usual. Emily glanced at him, sensing that this was more than just small talk. "About what?" "About where we go from here," he said, turning toward her. "We've built something incredible, and I can't help but wonder what comes next for us together." Emily felt a warmth spread through her at his words. She had been thinking the same thing, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel more real. "I think we've come a long way," she said gently, "and I'm excited for whatever comes next. We've faced so much already, and yet, here we are, ready for more." Adam smiled, a look of contentment in his eyes. "I never thought I'd get here. Never thought I'd be able to open up like this. But with you, it just feels right." There was something so profound in the way he said it. Emily knew that Adam had always struggled with letting go, with trusting people. But now, here he was, standing beside her, acknowledging what they had built and looking forward to what was still to come. It made her heart swell. "I never imagined this either," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "But I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Adam reached for her hand, his grip strong and sure. "I've never had someone like you in my life, Emily, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." Emily's breath caught in her throat. His words, simple as they were, held so much weight. She knew in that moment that she felt the same. She couldn't picture her future without Adam either. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice steady. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible, and I'm grateful for it." They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, letting the quiet envelop them. Emily realized that, for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future. With Adam by her side, she knew they could face anything that came their way. As the evening wore on, Adam broke the silence, his voice thoughtful. "You know, I've spent most of my life focused on work, on building this company, on climbing the ladder. But now, I see that there's so much more to life than just that." Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She too had been focused on her career, driven by the idea of proving herself. But through everything they had been through, she realized that success wasn't just about work. It was about the connections you made, the relationships you built, and the love you shared. "Everything we've built together," Adam continued, "it's more than just business. It's about creating something real, something that lasts." Emily squeezed his hand, her heart full. "And it will last, Adam, as long as we keep working together, whatever it takes." Adam looked at her, his eyes softening. "Together," he repeated, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, letting the weight of his words settle in. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, Emily knew one thing for sure. They were ready for whatever came next. They had faced challenges, they had built something stronger than either of them had expected, and now they were more than ready to take on the next chapter of their journey side by side. As the night sky stretched above them, Emily realized that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to discover, so much more to build, and together they were unstoppable. A step toward forever. The weeks following their conversation on the balcony marked the beginning of a new chapter for both Emily and Adam. The connection they had built, both personally and professionally, had become the foundation of something that felt unshakable. Their relationship was no longer just about shared goals or mutual respect. It was about trust, vulnerability, and the promise of a future together. At work, things were progressing at a rapid pace. Emily had taken on more responsibility, and Adam's confidence in her was evident in every decision he made. He relied on her insights and trusted her to handle some of the most crucial aspects of the business. They were working as a team in every sense of the word, and Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in how far they had come. Adam had always been a driven, ambitious man, but now she saw a new side of him, the side that was capable of trusting others, of allowing people to help him carry the weight. Outside of work, things were even better. Emily had never felt so at ease with someone before. The quiet moments they shared, the walks in the park, the dinners where they could talk about anything and everything, these moments were more precious than anything the world could offer. Adam had opened up to her in ways she had never imagined, and with each passing day, Emily found herself falling deeper for him. It was a beautiful Sunday morning when everything changed. Emily had just finished a long workout and was making her way home when she received a message from Adam. "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you meet me at the park in 30 minutes? Her heart raced as she read the text. Adam didn't usually send messages like that. There was a sense of urgency in his words, and it made her wonder what was going on. She quickly changed out of her workout clothes and headed out the door, her mind racing with possibilities. When she arrived at the park, she spotted Adam standing near the fountain where they had shared so many quiet moments. He was pacing back and forth, his expression serious. The sight of him immediately put her on edge. What was this about? "Adam?" she called, walking toward him. He stopped and turned to face her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite read. "Emily," he said, his voice strained. "I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything." Emily could feel her pulse quicken. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm ready," he said, taking a step toward her. "I'm ready to take the next step. With you. With us." The words hung in the air between them, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what he was referring to, but the intensity in his voice left no doubt that this was important. "I've been holding back," Adam continued, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. "I've spent my entire life trying to control everything. But I've realized that I can't keep doing that. I can't keep holding back from you." Emily's heart beat faster as she took in his words. She had always known that Adam had his fears, his reservations, but she had never imagined he would be this open about them. It was a side of him that no one else had seen, the side that wasn't afraid to admit vulnerability. "I'm ready to commit to this," Adam said, his voice trembling slightly. "To commit to you, to us." Emily's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. Was he talking about their relationship? About their future together? And yet, there was no mistaking the sincerity in his eyes. "I don't want to wait anymore," he continued, taking another step closer. "I know we've been taking things slow, but I think it's time. I think we're ready for the next chapter." The weight of his words hit her all at once. She had never been one to rush things, but with Adam, everything felt so natural. They had built something real, something strong, and for the first time, Emily realized that this was the future she had always wanted. It wasn't just about the career they were building or the success they had achieved. It was about the life they could create together. "I want that too," she said softly, her voice full of certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Adam reached out, taking her hand in his. The touch was warm, reassuring, as if to say that everything was going to be okay. "I love you, Emily," he said, his voice full of raw emotion. Tears sprang to Emily's eyes as she looked up at him. She had never heard him say those words so plainly before, but in that moment, they felt like everything. It was more than just love. It was the culmination of everything they had been through, everything they had worked for. It was a promise. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Adam smiled, the weight that had been on his shoulders for so long seemingly lifting. "Then let's take this step together. Let's make this real." Emily nodded, her heart full. She knew that the future wouldn't always be easy. They still had challenges ahead, both personally and professionally. But with Adam by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. They had faced their fears, learned to trust each other, and now they were ready to build something that would last. Together. As they stood there, hand in hand, the park around them seemed to fade away. In that moment, there was only the two of them, and the promise of everything that was yet to come. The road ahead might have been uncertain, but Emily knew that with Adam, they could face anything, and that was enough. The next chapter. The days following their conversation at the park felt like a dream, but they were grounded in reality. Emily and Adam had made a decision. They were ready to face the future together, not just as colleagues, but as partners in life. The love they had built over months of collaboration, challenges, and vulnerability was now the foundation of something stronger. They had crossed a threshold, and the world in front of them seemed full of possibilities. Work continued as it always did, but the dynamic between them had shifted. Adam no longer carried the same weight of isolation he had before. There was a lightness to him now, a confidence not only in the work they were doing, but in the relationship they were nurturing. He still had moments of intensity, moments when the CEO in him took over, but now there was a balance. Emily had become a part of that balance, a crucial piece of his life that he could rely on, and she had never felt more secure in her place by his side. One evening, after another late meeting with investors, Emily and Adam found themselves sitting on the rooftop of his apartment building. The city stretched out before them, a sea of lights twinkling in the distance. It was one of those rare moments when the hustle of their daily lives slowed, and they could just be together. No business, no pressure, just the two of them, enjoying the peace that came with being in each other's company. Adam broke the silence first, his voice soft but filled with something deeper. "I've been thinking about everything lately, about how far we've come. I still can't believe how much has changed in such a short amount of time." Emily glanced over at him, taking in the sincerity in his eyes. It wasn't just the success they had achieved in business, it was the personal growth they had both experienced. Adam had opened up in ways she hadn't thought possible, and she had learned to trust him fully, to let go of her own fears and embrace the future with him. "It feels surreal, doesn't it?" she said, her voice quiet as she leaned back in her chair, letting the cool breeze wash over her. "But at the same time, it feels right. Like everything we've been through has led us to this point." Adam nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I've spent my entire life building walls around myself, trying to keep everyone out. And then you came along, and suddenly I couldn't keep you away. It scared the hell out of me at first." Emily's heart softened as she listened to him. She had known about his fears, his hesitations. She had seen him struggle to let go, to trust not just her but anyone. And yet, here they were, stronger than ever. "You don't have to be afraid of that anymore, Adam," she said gently, her voice full of conviction. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, always." Adam's lips curled into a faint smile, and he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I know, and I'm starting to believe that I don't have to carry everything alone, that it's okay to lean on you. It's okay to trust." The vulnerability in his voice struck a chord deep within her. He had come so far, and yet there was still so much to discover. They had only just begun this new chapter, but Emily knew, without a doubt, that they were on the right path. "I've always believed that love isn't about perfection," she said, her voice thoughtful. "It's about finding someone who compliments you, someone who challenges you to be better, but also accepts you for who you are. And that's what we've done. We've learned to accept each other, flaws and all." Adam turned to face her fully, his eyes soft but filled with a fire that Emily had come to love. "You make me want to be a better person, Emily," he said quietly. "And I want to give you the same. I want to be the kind of partner you deserve." Her heart swelled with affection as she looked at him. It wasn't just the grand gestures, the moments of vulnerability, or the promises they had made. It was the quiet understanding, the way they had learned to communicate, to build something together. That was what made their relationship real. That was what made it strong. "I think we've already built something amazing," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "But I'm excited for what's next. We've got a lifetime ahead of us." Adam leaned forward, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was soft and filled with meaning. When they pulled away, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath steady. "We'll take it one day at a time," he said, his voice low. but I know I want to spend every day with you." Emily smiled, her heart full of love and certainty. "I feel the same way." The evening passed slowly, the two of them sitting in comfortable silence, letting the city hum around them. As the stars began to shine overhead, Emily realized that this was exactly where she was meant to be. With Adam in this moment, she felt complete. They had worked hard to get to this point, both in their careers and in their relationship, and they had come out stronger because of it. As the night wore on, they talked about their dreams for the future. Not just about business, not just about success, but about a life they could build together. A home, a family, a future that was theirs to shape. They talked about everything they had learned, the mistakes they had made, and how they had grown stronger because of them. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but that was okay. They had each other, and together they could face anything. And as Emily sat beside Adam, her hand in his, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would take it on together. The road ahead was uncertain, but with love as their foundation, they were ready to build something that would last forever. The journey between Emily and Adam highlights the importance of trust, vulnerability, and partnership in both personal and professional relationships. It shows that while ambition and success are important, they cannot replace the deeper connections we build with others. The key lesson here is that it's okay to let down your guard, to trust someone else with your heart and your dreams. Opening up, despite the fear of being hurt or vulnerable, is not a sign of weakness, but strength. The most meaningful relationships are built on mutual respect, acceptance, and a willingness to grow together. This story reminds us that success is not just about individual achievements, but about sharing those victories with others, learning from mistakes, and constantly evolving as a team. No matter how much we may want to control our environment, true fulfillment comes from allowing others in, whether it's a partner, a friend, or a colleague. In life, finding someone who challenges you, supports you, and helps you become a better version of yourself is the ultimate form of success. And sometimes, it's in taking risks and stepping into the unknown that we discover the most rewarding experiences. As Clara sat there, her mind spinning with thoughts and emotions, she realized that sometimes life has a funny way of giving us exactly what we need at the most unexpected moments. The man in front of her, this seemingly cold, controlled CEO, was opening his heart to her in a way she never thought possible. Was it all too good to be true? Could love really heal all wounds? In that moment, Clara let go of her doubts. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she didn't have to face it alone anymore. She wasn't just a girl lost in the crowd anymore. She was someone who mattered, someone who was worth fighting for. Adam stood up, offering his hand to her. But it wasn't just an offer for marriage. It was a promise to be there, through the good and the bad, through the unexpected turns that life might throw at them. As they walked together side by side, Clara knew that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. No matter how uncertain or messy life could get, they would face it together, hand in hand, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she thought. Not anymore. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe to Stories TH for more amazing tales. And hey, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your world? I love hearing from you all. Take care, and remember, sometimes the best parts of life are the ones we least expect.